and welcome to this special edition of League Insider ko Ravinda Hunia tōku ingoa. Today's story is one of survival, determination and patriotism, not only to the game of rugby league, but as a soldier in World War II. 98-year-old Ray Cranch is the longest surviving Kiwi player in Aotearoa, and this is his story. Rugby league legends often share old stories of competing for their country, but few involve stories of survival. For New Zealand's longest living Kiwis player, Ray Cranch, his first success wasn't on the footy field, but on the battlefield preparing for World War II.
But when I was a kid, I used to be a great reader, and I went for many years up to the Grafton Library in Kiwi Pass. Read chapter and verse of the Western Front and the Gallipoli, and was heartbroken to feel that the commanders of the armies had so little thought for their soldiers that they just threw their lives away. And when you're losing 20,000 in a day, it makes you realise. And I was always determined that, well, I can't say I was, because I didn't know the war was going to start, but when the war did start in '39, my fellow apprentice at Charles Davey and Sons in Kiwi Pass went over to Ponsonby Drill Hall, added a couple of years to our ages, and joined the Territorials. I had made my mind up before we went, and I'd spoken to my friend Russell Gribble, who finished up as an officer in the 3rd Division in the Pacific, and I wasn't going to be in the infantry. I wasn't going to be in the Air Force. I had a brother in the Air Force. I wasn't going to be in the Navy. The only other thing was the artillery, and the artillery has been my home.
Crunch's recollection of the war and seriously close calls are still so clear for the 98-year-old. The many experiences only giving him determination to live the rest of his life to the fullest.
On the 6th of June, that was one of the worst days of my life. Lying in a slip trench with a tin hat over the old collie wobblers, just in case. And the Germans had retired from Cassino. They hadn't gone very far, they'd just gone to a range of hills and set themselves up, watched till the Divati took their positions up and then let us have it. I lost a few good friends on that day, 6th of June, which was D-Day, of course. And but the most embarrassing thing was that I was lying in this bloody slip trench with shells bursting all around me, and I'm screaming, "I'll be good. If I can get out of this, I promise I'll be good." So you can imagine what sort of state you're in. Americans had had a go at Cassino and failed. The Indians had had another go and failed. And I've always been thankful that the Polish division under General Anders, having been, the country had been run over by the Nazis and the Russians, and they were the ones who finally conquered Cassino. The bombing of Cassino, having been able to witness it and witness dive bombers, I had a commanding officer, Gordon Hazard, who had lived about 200 yards when I was growing up, and he took me up to the OP at Trocchio, Mount Trocchio, which was where the regiment was sort of hiding behind. I watched these American dive bombers put the final set of bombs into the monastery. General Mark Clark of the 5th Army wasn't very happy about it, but General Freiberg realised just what a vantage point the monastery was, even though the Germans weren't inside the monastery, they were outside. But if you've been to the monastery, you can see down the Lurie Valley for miles. And when the bombers, these 100 bombers, B-29s, came up the valley, all the small towns like Whanau and a few other towns were at the foot of hills, and with the poor navigation of these planes, at one stage or another, someone dropped a bomb on these towns. We were sort of on the hill at Trocchio, looking down back as the bombers came up, and we could see the bombs falling. And fortunately, we had gun pits and slit trenches and stuff to get into, and we didn't move very far away from them, just in case. But they bypassed us and went on to bomb Cassino. At the end of the war, when we were leaving Trieste, which I regard as my second hometown, we went to a place called Lake Trasimeno. That was to train to go to Japan. We'd seen all the bazaar with Tarawa and the different places that the Americans had taken into fighting the Japanese, and the casualties didn't give us much hope. But as I say, you've got to be lucky. Fortunately, before we finished training at Trasimeno, President Truman dropped the atomic bomb. And while I'm regretful for the loss of life, it certainly saved our lives.
Serving alongside his countrymen became part of Cranch's DNA. He stayed true to his word, channeling his passion to rugby league, playing for Auckland before officially becoming a Kiwi representative in 1951 and, ironically, swapping weapons for the black jersey for his return to England and France.
With my football, I was lucky enough to be chosen to go to England and France in the Kiwi team, and consequently being still in the army as a territorial officer, was asked if I wanted to go to Korea, and regretfully declined, for which I've been very grateful. If you're a footballer, it's the highest honour you can have. In those days, you had parties after the games, or all the rest of that jazz, and the blokes would be in the kitchen singing, and the ladies and the rest of them in the living room. And I didn't give myself a dog show. And a mate, or what was a friend of mine, Alf Broadhead, who was a PR man, we had to come to the Carnival Park to get checked in the morning. He said, boy, you're lucky. I said, you don't have to tell me. Yes, no. That's one of the greatest things in my life, to be chosen. Well, I think it gives you a kick. You know, I've played with some good players and been very fortunate to know a lot more. And when they're playing well, they're pretty to watch. It's the best game in the world. It gives you free movement. I'm not going to say that it's a. I wouldn't want to play anything else. Like, I watched Union naturally to see how Auckland and the Crusaders and the Hurricanes and all the rest of those, how they get on. But their game is not as good as ours. It's a freer game, if I can put it that way. My history has always been take the penalties and move the effing ball. And that effing ball is the main thing to do. Move it.
His playing days soon came to an end, but rugby league held a firm grip on Cranch. He first became a New Zealand schoolboys selector and manager, making some tough decisions that ultimately determined one of our most revered sporting heroes.
When I came back from the war, and I said, is there any way I can help you? And they said, there's a vacancy on the schoolboy control board. Would you care to have that on? I said, well, I don't know anything about it, but we'll try it. So eventually I became a schoolboy control board who went round to various grounds, watching the games, checking the games, picking players. And I went from the gamut of a member of the schoolboy control board, a selector, and a coach. George Rainey, who was the chairman of the Auckland Rugby League, said to me, how would you like to take over the judicial? So a bloke, Lou Pearson and myself, took over the judicial cases of the Auckland Rugby League. Then from there, I got the job of selecting the referee of the day at Carlisle Park. And that was an excuse to mingle with the referees. I became an Auckland selector and manager, took a Kiwi schoolboy side to Australia, and in the interim lost league a very good player in the case of Sir Brian Williams. We had a selection game at Rotorua to pick the team, and Brian Williams was playing on the wing for Marist, and he was an outstanding goal kicker, outstanding footballer. And my two fellow selectors said, you've got to drop someone from that side. And I said, why? Well, he said, you've got about 6 Aucklanders in that side. You've got to allow players from another area to have a chance. So what do? I saw my fellow selector, Laurie Blanchard, and Seth Mountford, and said, who are we going to drop? And I said, well, there's only one bloke that's sort of outstanding that we can do without. And that was Brian Williams. I've seen him since many times, Brian, and said, well, Brian, you're a knight, and that's the biggest achievement that anyone can have. But I'm afraid that if you'd have stuck with rugby league, he wouldn't have been a knight. And that's probably a very harsh thing to say, but he got the business. When he wasn't taken on that tour, he swapped immediately to rugby, for which I didn't blame him.
Cranch is the last surviving player from the 1951-52 Kiwi squad, going on to receive almost every accolade there is for his patriotism to rugby league. But with a full trophy cabinet and even an order of merit, one success shines brighter than the rest.
I've been lucky. I've had 2 wives, June and Leslie, and 6 daughters. There's no one left. No one left I can talk to. All my football team, the Kiwis, they're all passed on. All my army mates are gone. And I suppose at 98, you've got to be fortunate that you're still around.